Gosh, it's Friday afternoon already. I can't believe how quickly the week has flown by. Those of you that are joining us for the very first time and we don't know each other, I trust that this is going to be an opportunity for you to get to know us, and maybe there is some opportunity for us to collaborate with each other. For those of you that do know us, welcome. It's really nice to have you back again. And I'm going to suggest to everybody that you grab a notepad and you start taking notes, because I'm sure I'm going to mention a number of things during the presentation which you'd like to talk about afterwards. So the presentation is going to work like this. It's going to be an hour long, and then at the end of the hour, I'm going to stop the recording, and what we will do is we'll open the microphones and you can ask as many questions as you want. If you have any pressing issues or questions that you want to ask, don't hesitate to pop them into the chat box. Natalie's going to be in the background and she's going to be assisting us with some of the administrative work. So I'll introduce Penny and myself and Natalie to you in a moment, but to everybody else that's joined us, welcome. It's exactly on the hour. Let's move on. Today, we're going to be doing a presentation on the corporate sector doing their own occupational health and safety training, because we know for a fact that there are many corporates out there that have maybe an inadequate health and safety program or drive, and for a variety of reasons, they may want to bring this in-house so that they can curb their costs and make sure that the quality is up to standard and so forth. And that's what it's going to be about. I'm also going to take the presentation, which we're recording. I will pop it onto YouTube this afternoon or evening, and then you'll be able to get the URL from Natalie, and she will then provide you with this and more information as we go. Okay, so let's get straight into the presentation. First and foremost, my name is Ken Annandale, and I'm not a lawyer. I have a background in law enforcement, and I thoroughly enjoy legislation. I like reading it, I like understanding it and interpreting it, things like that. And I'm also not an accountant. So if you have any legal questions or any accounting questions, please do not hesitate to speak to your own accountant and or legal advisor. Penny and I started this business about 12, 13 years ago. And I'm going to ask Penny just to quickly introduce herself verbally so that you know who she is. Penny is my wife and our business partner, my business partner. And over to you, Penny.
Hi, everybody. Thanks, Ken. So I'm more on the finance side of the business. I'm also responsible for delivery. I also head up the e-learning platform for INTRA. And as from January of last year, I got heavily invested with the QCTO accreditation journey, and I'm responsible for delivering that side of the business as well. Look forward to being of service to you.
And if you look closely at the picture, you'll see our cat, or one of our cats in the photograph. I noticed that the cat is there. Now, we're members of SIOSH and IOSH and APID. And that's by way of a little bit of professional background and so forth. I'm going to ask Natalie to introduce herself just in a moment, but we're based in Mauritius, although our business is based in South Africa, and Natalie is based in South Africa. So having said that, that's our team. So quite simply, it's Penny and myself and Natalie. Natalie, the young lady with the dark hair and the black top and looks like a white shirt. There we go. Natalie, would you like to quickly introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi everyone, I'm Natalie and I'm the CRM manager. So I'm usually your first point of contact on your journey to becoming a licensee. I'm your go-to for any initial questions that you need or anything, any documents that you would like. I manage all of that, and I also set up any meetings that you may want ahead of time in terms of one-on-ones to discuss your health and safety vision in terms of training.
Great. Thanks, Nats. Nats is my daughter. And so it's Penny's my wife, Natalie's my daughter. And then the remainder of the team over here that you can see, the lady with the blonde hair, she's our debtors and creditors clerk. The gent with the check shirt is our attorney, Mike. The lady at the bottom left-hand corner is Deline. None of these people work for us full-time other than Penny and Natalie. But Deline is a phenomenal training material developer and occupational health and safety fundi. The gent with the black shirt and glasses is our accountant, Gavin. The guy with the grey shirt is the man that's in charge of our e-learning platform. The young man with the big smile and the bright surfer shirt, he heads up an organization called Semantica, and they are our social media specialists. And then the man on the right-hand side with the black shirt there His name is Shane, and he looks after all our IT requirements and software development and things like that. Okay, so that's the team, but there are a lot more people that actually collaborate with us as we go. Now, everything that I'm going to be saying today, you'll get in a document called the prospectus. If you haven't received the prospectus, you can go onto the website and you can request it, and it'll be sent to you automatically. So grab your phone and take a photograph of that URL at the bottom there, www.intrasafe.co.za/request more information, and you'll receive the prospectus. The prospectus is a critical document because we're going to suggest that you do your due diligence and you make sure that you've read it with a highlighter. And then you can take the prospectus and any questions that you might have to your accountant or your attorney and ask them for their opinion. Okay, let's get straight into the presentation. You may or may not know that South Africa has something like 16.5 million employed people and about 8.5 million unemployed people. This is not talking about the youth. This is talking about adults who could or should or must be trained in terms of occupational health and safety because the Occupational Health and Safety and Regulations Act and Regulations demands it. We know that the legislation is supported by something like 21 different regulations, from asbestos right through to pressure equipment, and those regulations require information, instruction, training, and the question is, who must do this training? Well, let's have a look at Section 8 in the Act, and it says the following. It says the employer shall, in terms of Section 8D and E, establish the hazards and precautionary measures. Very simple. So all training must be hazard-based. And it must then take into account the precautionary measures that are being established. And then the employer must provide information, instructions, training, and supervision. Now, those three words are going to come up over and over and over and over. And this is the foundation of occupational health and safety and the training that needs to take place. Then in terms of Section 13, it says the employer shall cause every employee to be made conversant with those hazards and the precautions. So the employer is to do the training, and every employee is to be made conversant with the dangers, hazards, and risks. Bear that in mind, because as we look at how we're going to do occupational health and safety training in the future, it's going to be based purely on hazards, although the legislation's been around for a good couple of years. Now, here are a couple of topics that the employer may identify, or you may identify, as requiring training or information or instruction. And I'll provide you with this list if you wish, but this is just an arbitrary list of things that could come up in the workplace where training needs to take place. And let me just say that again, it might be information or instruction or training. Three different things, but three things that must take place. Okay, so who must present the training? Well, it then carries on and says that the employer may appoint training providers or mandatories, as we know the word in the Act, a contractor. And this includes an agent or contractor or subcontractor, but without derogating from his status in his own right, the employer and the user and those rights that go with it. So the obvious thing is you can either appoint a training provider or alternatively, you do it yourself as an in-house training establishment. Now, it is important if you happen to be a training provider to take note of Section 37 of the Act, because it says if a trainer does something for and on behalf of an employer, and the trainer breaks the law, that trainer can also be convicted and held liable. And that's an important aspect. Bear that in mind, that you as the trainer or mandatory, if you're one of those, that you also have legal responsibilities in terms of the Act. Now, people often ask me the question, am I allowed to do this training? What warrants that I can go out and do training? Well, the Constitution. And we're all familiar with the Constitution of South Africa, and there's a Section 22 in the Constitution that says you can choose your profession, except if that's governed by law. Then the question comes up, but surely this training must be accredited. And the answer is no, it doesn't have to be accredited. Let me say that again. It is not compulsory that training be accredited, except where the regulation uses the word competency. Now, those of you that have been following the transition of the SETAs to the QCTO know that they talk a lot about competent person, and so forth. Do you know that the word competent is actually a legally defined word before it came up with SAQA, SETA, NQF, QCTO, and so forth? And there is a definition. Now, if you look on the right-hand side, you will see that there are 4 regulations: general safety regs, driven machinery regs, construction regs, and ergonomics regs. Now, in those regulations, it uses the definition of a competent person, which means that you would have to be accredited to run those training programs or use an accredited training provider, an important part. But what a lot of people miss completely is that there's another section that normally comes up with the definition, and it's the one that's highlighted in yellow. It says that this competent person not only must be competent in that specific area, but they must also be familiar with the Act and the applicable regulations. And this is something I see that often happens, is that we focus on the skill, but not the Act and regulations. Okay, so having said that, there are a number of other regulations as well where competency is required. Asbestos, explosives, commercial diving, hazardous biological agents, hazardous chemical agents, and major hazard installations. It does require competency there. And you'll see on the left-hand side where the definition comes up, it says here in the letters that are italic, provided that where appropriate qualifications and training are registered in terms of the NQF Act. Those qualifications and that training. Now, we used to call these unit standards. Nowadays, with the QCTO, we call them curriculum codes. So, if the law says and uses that NQF Act reference in the definition, then competency is required. However, things are changing. Those of you that have been following the discussions around the draft construction regulations, you'll notice that they've taken out that reference to the NQF Act. How about that? It's gone. So they've changed or are about to change the definition of competency, but more about that in future. So competency is something which is really important. So if you happen to represent a corporate and that corporate has a trainer, that trainer is going to be running the program, then the question is, who actually declares the trainee or the learner competent? Well, here's an interesting thing. The employer, not the training company. Let me say that again. It is the employer's responsibility to declare the person competent. Now, that's, again, something that is frequently missed. Grab your phone, take a photograph of that bit.ly URL there, https://bit.ly/competent person, and download this document. And you can get it and look at it and read it. And it's on the second page where it says twice, it speaks twice. It says that's the employer's responsibility to declare a person competent, not the training company, by the way. Now, we're talking legislation on the one hand, and we're talking SAQA, SETA, NQF. Do you know, of course, you can't be prosecuted unless you're involved in a fraudulent issue under the NQF Act or SAQA, SETA, and things like that. It is the Occupational Health and Safety Act that is criminal legislation. Don't do it, you could land up in court. Now, who could land up in court? Who could be found guilty? Anyone. Anyone. There's a term called any person. And you and I are all any persons. If we don't do a proper job, we could be an any person. And what happens to the any person if convicted? In terms of the current act, the Occupational Health and Safety Act, 50,000 Rand fine per offence. Now, we have been talking about, and they've been talking about, the Department of Employment and Labour, have been talking about the amendment bill. And just have a look at how high that fine goes, up to 5 million Rand. And may I just remind you that it is per offence. And we know about that incident that took place in George the other day, and there were a couple of dozen people that were killed. So it could be a couple of dozen times 5 million when that act comes out. So it's serious stuff. Now, I don't like to scare people with the legislation. The legislation is what it is. And of course, we're all aware of the fact that we live by the rule of law. So it is important for us to do this. So if you happen to be a corporate and you have an intention of complying with the legislation, please take into account that this is serious stuff. And you could avoid this by doing your own training. Now, let's talk a bit more about the corporate in-house training process. Question is why? Well, there are a number of reasons why. Money, it's a legal compliance. It's something that you can work with and customize. It's something that you make sure that works for you. There's knowledge base, and let's run through them quickly. The first one is the financial benefits. And obviously, if you're a corporate right now, especially with the tariffs and things that are being placed on South Africa and the state of our economy and so forth, cost control and savings are critical. Furthermore, it's important that organizations such as yours budget accurately and that you bring the cost under control And then, of course, you have insurance premiums and QCTO premiums and things like that. So there's a huge benefit to an organization, massive savings if you do the training in-house. Then I mentioned the compliance aspect, so that if and when something happens that you're ready and can prove, and you've got the evidence to show that you've complied with the law. And evidence is a very important thing when it comes to criminal procedure and evidence. And it's a subject that I studied at police college. And of course, it also means that to comply, that you could align the training material or training that is provided against your own risk profile. Should it make sense? And then, of course, by complying, you reduce your personal liability, the employer's liability, and of course, the organization's liability. Then, of course, the next point is aligning it means customizing it and controlling it and making sure that content is right. You cannot believe how often Penny and I and Natalie have heard the story where the person comes on site to run a training program. By 2 o'clock, he walks off. I did the training, he says. And we go, no, that's not quality. That's really not quality, especially when it's supposed to be a 1 or 2 day or 3 day course. Okay, so very important for the employer to be able to customize the training material, to control the content so that it doesn't get off target or track, that it is risk and hazard and danger specific, that it's tailored. And there I talk about tailored in terms of language, culture, background, experience, things like that, because we know that we have a vast array of people that would need to attend these training programs, and that's adaptable. And adaptable in the sense that as and when things change, the training can change. I have a confession to make. The confession is this, is when I worked for NOSA, and I was there for 5 years in the Western Cape, we used to run exactly the same course, day in, day out, morning in, morning out. It was just like the same old. And we barely customized anything. So you can see how one could break the law there. But imagine the benefit if this training is customized to your specific needs. And then, of course, we need to make sure that the organization is efficient. Right from the time that the person comes to the organization, does an onboarding or an induction program with minimal interruptions of transport and accommodation and all of those sorts of things, providing flexibility in terms of when these training programs are going to be run. And instead of me just coming in to do a 1 day or 2 day or 3 day course in the past, I don't do training anymore as such, that is flexible. And you can run a 1 day course over 5 mornings, as an example, or a 2 day course over 5 mornings. And then, of course, curtailing the cost, we've mentioned that, but also curtailing the dangers, hazards, and risks, the injuries, the damage, the death, and so forth. Okay. So the last one is ensuring that your people actually know what they're doing. And a corporate, or like yourselves, you could find yourself in a situation where your employees are knowledgeable. Now, remember in section 13, it said the employee must be conversant. It's a legal requirement. So imagine this, the employee goes into a workshop, let's call it ergonomics training. When they come out, they're conversant in the topic of ergonomics, and they could actually have a discussion around ergonomics. And that's what we mean by knowledge. So the person has now got sufficient knowledge to operate safely and to remember it and to reuse the knowledge over and over and over again, also to scale it. So as your organization is growing or shrinking, depending on the situation, that the training material grows or shrinks with your needs. And then the last one is consistency. Cape Town, Durban, Joburg, PE, East London, and wherever your organization happens to operate. We've got platinum licensees, and that's what we call them, corporate licensees around Africa. And in South Africa alone, we've got corporate licensees in the educational field. We've got a number of universities use our training material. In the food industry, we have organizations, large multinational dairies. One of the organizations that's a licensee, a platinum licensee with us, is in the tire industry. And those of you that were watching saw the other day that Goodyear is closing down. So there's going to be a lot of flexibility required there. And we have more. We have people in government that use our training material as well as a corporate or an in-house training program. And we will gladly accommodate you and talk to you about how we can make that work. And then, of course, the big thing is, why do in-house training? Well, employees die. Unfortunately, they are injured. They don't go home at night or if they do go home at night, they go home diseased. And unfortunately, employees in their retirement years manifest diseases that should never have happened had the necessary processes been in place. Okay, so having said that, I published a book some years ago called The 1 Minute Safety Manager. If you'd like a copy of that, Natalie will send you an e-copy of it, and we will gladly send it to you. There's no cost involved. So please let Natalie know, send 1 Minute Safety Manager to this email address or WhatsApp number, and she'll do that for you. Okay, now another reason, why in-house training? Now, there's a question that comes up. If it doesn't have to be accredited, can we then do legal compliance training? And the answer is yes. If it has to be accredited, just take a look at this. This is like the little roadmap, the waypoints. All those points have to be addressed during an accredited training program, making it exceedingly expensive if you're sending your people out. Way better if you have your own accreditation within your own organization and you can control the costs. Wow. So I would imagine that if the employee is attending a training program, let's say it's a 2 or 3 day training program, and it's done in-house, there's no additional cost for the company. But please note that there are a number of things that honestly need to be dealt with. But if you decide that you're going to do just an in-house legal compliance training program, it's just the elements in yellow that you have to pay for or tend to. Now remember, this is not accredited training. This is in-house legal compliance training. And you can see the massive, massive saving when it comes to in-house legal compliance training. Now, I use this example all the time, and I was chatting to Penny about it this morning. Let's say I'm a fairly small organization, and I've got half a dozen health and safety representatives that need training. For half a dozen health and safety reps, I need to engage the services of at least 10, 12 people to train half a dozen safety reps. Isn't that crazy? It's a horrendously expensive process, and it drags out, and it takes a lot of time. And we'll be talking in our orientation sessions about things like certification and how long it takes to get a certificate into your hands. Whereas if you do your training yourself in-house, you can literally, the day after, you can issue a certificate of attendance, and that certificate of attendance will show the Department of Employment and Labor that you have done the training. Not that it's accredited, but that it has been done. And that's legal compliance. Okay, now I wanted to quickly touch on a couple of things which I call myth information. And I'm sure that you know that a lot of clients want accreditation. And the reason they want accreditation is they have this image in mind that if they do health and safety training, they're going to be able to add to their 𝗵𝗵 scorecard points. Well, no. No. You cannot get 𝗵𝗵 points for mandatory training. And you can find that reference in one of those two places. Once again, it will take you to a government gazette, and it actually says that in the government gazette. Very important. So then we'll move on. Another myth information, where people believe that they have to use accredited training. And I remember years ago, I had a lovely long discussion with a lady who said, well, health and safety training has to be accredited and run by accredited people. And I go, Auntie, what are you smoking? You don't have to. Employers don't have to. They can if they want to. It's not compulsory. And they can still get their money back from the skills development levy. So BEE points, we completely understand why they want it. And for organizations that want to claw back some of their rebate or their levy, they don't have to use accredited providers. That's a myth. And it's pointed out in the government gazette and various documents. How about that? So we're mythbusters. We're telling people nonsense. It's not true. And when you get to know me, you will get to know us at least, is that we say, read the law. Don't make it up. Don't make it up. Okay. Now, to help organizations such as yourselves, we've got a licensing system. And some of the people that are attending today are corporates, and other people are individuals, and they want to set up their own training department, or alternatively, they want to extend their business. So we've got a number of licenses, starting with Starter, Basic, Prime, and Platinum. And you'll see Prime and Prime Plus That's a very popular license of ours. But today we're speaking about the Platinum license, the corporate license. And all of this information is in the prospectus. So Platinum is the focus. And this is what the model looks like. It's very much like a franchise, but we don't expect you to set up your own business if you already have a business and you're corporate. But if you are an individual and you would like to set up your training business, this is what the model looks like. And I'll touch on these issues as we go along. You'll see that we sign up people under the franchise or the license, and there are the options. Then we have an onboarding session. Then we have a monthly orientation session. Then we provide you with training material and training material orientation. Then we have a lot of legal compliance training material. There's 25 programs there. We have an e-learning platform. We have SAQA unit standard aligned training material, some of which is still usable until June 2026 if you're accredited. Then we've got an education program that runs on an ongoing basis with webinars and so forth. And then right at the bottom, you'll see that we start looking at the accreditation process, and Penny jumps in there and she helps out there. We've got QCTO line training material, not much yet, but it's coming. And we've got some good news coming shortly. And then, of course, we have an accreditation kit to help you get your accreditation. And Penny will talk about that in a moment. And then we have accreditation workshops. And then lastly, whether you're going to be a licensed sort of individual training provider or a corporate, there are wonderful networking opportunities, absolutely brilliant, and we're extending that as far as we can. So what Penny and her team have done is they've also put an e-learning program together, and mainly for the orientation of the trainers. You'll see there's 18 programs there, but also if you happen to be a individual private training provider, you can actually on-sell attendance of these programs, and Penny will give you more information on that. So that's very exciting. We have a certificate once you completed all 18 called the HAZMAN. Now, we have an orientation session that takes place on a regular basis. Firstly, there's the onboarding that I spoke of, and then the monthly orientation for licensees. If you happen to be a corporate, we will also suggest that your management team attend an Occupational Health and Safety Act briefing, which takes place about 4 hours, half a day, thereabouts, depending on questions and answers, which I do via Zoom. We also, for the trainers of the organization, have a 2-day online train the trainer program. And for one person who needs to do an ETDP SETA accredited facilitator or assessor program, for the accreditation process, we will then register you on that program. It's also done as an outsourced blended learning program. And a big aspect that Penny deals with is the coaching, so that you can do your own accreditation in future. And then ongoing training support. Now, I mentioned we've got 25 training programs, and when you get to the prospectus, you can see the subjects there. Furthermore, I mentioned as well is that we have these ongoing webinars, and we have now secured a number of legal minds who will be coming to lecture to and speak to and advise our licensees, including a former chief inspector and so forth. So advocate, attorney, chief inspector, and I believe that will really help you, the trainer and or the employer, to understand the legislation better. We've been involved in this world of health and safety training for about 30 years, and more recently we see some changes that are starting to take place, which are very exciting. Okay, from there, I mentioned that we have SAQA unit standard aligned programs. There's 40 programs there. Now, even if you can't get your SETA accreditation, as you probably know, nobody can get SETA accreditation anymore. It's all got to go through the QCTO. But you can use those 40 programs and use the content to train your own people, which is really exciting. Now, I'm going to ask Penny to talk a little bit about the accreditation process. This is absolutely her baby, and she loves the topic.
Thanks, Ken. So with the accreditation process with the QCTO, we decided to create a do-it-yourself process. But if you're a corporate member, just remember that you would also be able to take advantage of our project managed accreditation process, where we kind of like hold your hand through the whole schedule of events that happens. And depending on the size of your company, it might be necessary to register assessment centers, like one of our corporate clients Lactalis, they have several assessment centers around the country. So it just depends on your size and what your specific needs are. But we're really, really excited about our do-it-yourself QCTO process. We've had a tremendous amount of success with it, and we really take away the challenges, if you like. We make it as simple as possible, and we take you through the different stages so that you know exactly what to expect, and you can make sure that every I is dotted and every T is crossed.
Penny, how many of our licensees have already been through the accreditation process?
Sure. I think probably at least 20 or 30 now and counting. So it's adding up fast. Every week I get another licensee that says, oh, just had the site visit, everything went well. Looking forward now to receiving the letter of accreditation. At the moment, as you probably know, the QCTO has a vacuum in terms of OHS skills programs. There are only 3 at the moment: basic, intermediate, and advanced first aid. So we've used those heavily for our licensees up until now to get their QCTO accreditation in place. And we also developed the training material for those 3 skills programs as well. And this is the advantage of the higher licenses like Prime, Prime Plus, and Platinum, is that any and all new training materials that we bring are included in your delivery. So you don't pay again for those new training materials. And this really is going to be a massive cost saving going forward as we see the new OHS skills programs being approved and published. So this is just an example of some of our licensees and their site visits. Always we take great care to make sure that they're fully prepared. We even have some of our licensees that are in fact QCTO verifiers, and that has been very helpful as well, and they can give their point of view and make sure that our licensees are fully prepared or even rehearsed before the site visits. So the site visits have been going extremely well. So the QCTO have partnered with SETA for OHS skills programs. They've also partnered with the CETA for working at height skills programs, and the SETA for the fire skills programs, and for TITA for transport skills programs. But in particular, we've been working with the SETA and looking to get as many of the normal low-hanging fruit skills programs through as quickly as possible. This has been a longer process than what we anticipated. But the good news is that the middle of June 5 were approved at the QCTO committee, and we are waiting for them to be published on the QCTO website imminently. And we don't know if that's going to be today, or imminently is going to be next week, or imminently is going to be in a month's time. But we are confident that they will be coming through fairly soon. And we are, in the meantime, preparing for those so that as soon as those final curricula are published, we'll be able to fine-tune those training materials and make them available to you. There is also another 4 that have just been approved in the month of August. I'm still waiting for the official letter to be sent to me so that I can see exactly which are the 4. We hope it's HAZREP, and we hope it's ergonomics. I'm not sure. These are the ones that, of course, are so important to all of us. And ergonomics, as you know, there's 8 places in the regulation where it insists that every single employee is trained in ergonomics. So very, very important one. But at least we've got the legal compliance. But there will be many more coming down in the pipeline. As you can see, some of the curricula that have already been developed and are also waiting for their approvals and then to be published on the website. So it is an ongoing process. We have found that the QCTO's purpose, if you like, mission, if you like, tends to be reflected in curriculum that are fairly elevated compared to what we are normally used to for 1-day, 2-day, or 3-day courses. And I think what you will find is that logically you will need to do your own informed instructor training at the level that's necessary, and then do your own 1- or 2-day legal compliance courses at the level that's necessary, and then to take it up another level that's where you would bring in your QCTO accredited courses, other than where it's legally required, like for first aid, etc. We don't have time to go into all of the QCTO updates today. I think there's a session next week on Friday. We've been doing one every month just to keep everybody up to date as to what's happening with the QCTO and Department of Employment and Labour with regards to OHS and the Institute of Working at Heights and what they are doing. So there's a lot happening. And with that, I'm going to hand back to Ken.
Great. Penny, I want to ask you a question. How long does it normally take from start to finish with accreditation, from the application going in?
It seems to be about 4 to 6 months, depending on you and how organized you are. We can show you where are the critical places where you can save time. And as we are sitting right now in August, if you are really organized and you've got most of the documents already, you've got an excellent venue, it would be conceivable that you could get your online application in by the end of August or first week of September, and you would stand a good chance of getting into the pipeline for a site visit before the end of the year cutoff. As you know, things close down over December and part of January, but then, you'd still be looking at the end of January, probably having a site visit if they couldn't fit it into this year. But absolutely doable and worthwhile to get onto the QCTO ladder. And we do provide a lot of the background and understanding and, policies and procedures. And never mind, the other whole massive element with the QCTO is their quality assurance process, which is very, very different to the SETA processes, and that is something that you have to take very, very carefully and seriously. And we're very grateful that the QCTO have just published a whole lot of workshop documents that we've had access to just recently, that is informing our workshops to make sure that it's not as painful as it needs to be, and
it's doenbaar.
And the process of getting your certificates is that whole big issue. And handing back to Ken.
Fantastic. Penny, she's so knowledgeable on this. She spends hours researching it and making sure that it's all good. And I want to say to you that if you join us as a licensee, you will get excellent service from Penny. Now, having said that, we recognize that for many people coming into the training business and or starting a training department, that there's a lot to learn. There's no question about it. I mentioned that my working careers, I actually started as a policeman, then I became an officer in the Navy, and then I got into security. And then I got into health and safety. I had no idea what health and safety was. And in some instances, employers say to your training department or human resources person, I want you to do the training. And for those people, we have a whole onboarding orientation process. We have an operations manual. We do these things via Zoom every single month. There's a 4-hour session with questions and answers. We liaise, discuss, debate via WhatsApp. We've got a WhatsApp group that we use to communicate with, and you and your trainers would be involved in that. An example that we have is one of our clients is in Liberia, and that client has trainers. Now, there's no way that they could send their trainers to South Africa for training. Alternatively, I could fly to Liberia, but there's also, I'm not terribly keen on doing that. So what we do is we use Zoom, or we use Teams, or we use one of these. These platforms are available, and we use them very effectively. Okay, so having bragged about Liberia, we happen to be in about 8 different countries in Africa at the moment, literally from Dubai to Durbanville. And we joke about it, but we have people in Africa that are not even English speaking. So we address that. We've got a way and a means to make sure that the training material is translated into the language that they speak in their country. And for a small fee, we do that. We translate the material for them as well. Well, I don't do it, but I have somebody that does it for me. Okay, so with that in mind, we happen to be in every major center in South Africa. And it means that essentially, if you need a Working at Heights training program run in Kakamas or Kemus or Kimberley or someplace like that, but it doesn't warrant you driving there, well, the first thing that we do is we say, make sure that the employee goes through the e-learning program so that they get the theory. Then what you can do is you can actually get somebody else, a licensee, a licensed trainer, to go and do the training in those areas using our training material. Now, I just want to quickly mention that one of the big benefits becoming a licensee, and certainly a corporate licensee is that you don't have to write the training material. What you would be responsible for is you would need to customize it. So we provided you in a customizable format. It's in Word for Windows and PowerPoint and so forth. And when you go into the prospectus, you'll see the 25 programs that we've got already with more under development. Okay, so that's the collaboration process. So what we say is that we've got these different licenses, and I'm going to run through the costings with you very, very quickly. Firstly, as a platinum and or corporate licensee, the license then extends to the entire country and geographic area. So if you're a licensee, and we have examples of many examples of licensees where they have offices in different countries. One of our clients has, I think they're in 11 different countries. So the license fee starts at an upfront fee of 120,000 plus, and I say plus, it's all negotiated based on the number of employees. How many people are going to be trained? And I think they said they've got 13,000 employees that need to be trained. They were talking about the budget. Their current budget is equivalent to 18 million rand. And so when we quote them, we work that out. There's a scale that we work on, and we provide you with the price in writing so that you know what you're going to be getting. Now, the license itself lasts for 5 years, but together with the license fee, there is a subscription, a monthly license fee, or in this instance, the platinum, it's an annual license fee, and we negotiate that on the number of employees. Now, for those other licenses, such as the Prime and the Prime Plus, you'll see the license fee over there. For the Prime, it's 54,450, and Prime Plus is 76,000. You might go, why the difference? Penny, why the difference in price there?
So the Prime Plus is where we actually do a project managed hand-holding for the QCTO accreditation process. So from application through the different stages of the initial application, and then preparation for the site visit and all the follow-up and monitoring, etc., that goes with that, making use of a consultant if required. So it's all included within that.
However, we would want you, the training provider or the licensee, to actually do your own training and your own accreditation application. And the reason for that is that QCTO has some fairly strict rules when it comes to the number of codes or curricula that need to be passed at any one time. And we'll talk to you about that in our orientation session. I think that's 5, is that right? 5 at a time.
Yeah, at the moment it seems to be 5. It was 6, now it seems to be 5. But yes, you can only apply for 5 accreditations at any one time.
So if you're using a consultant, which we don't mind, I mean, you can do that, that's great. The problem is that you're disconnected from the application process. You don't know what's been accredited and so forth. So more information on that when you chat to Penny afterwards. Now, Prime Plus means that you have somebody do it for you. And then, of course, there is a monthly license fee for all the other packages as well. So for basic and for starter, there's a license fee, and that is a monthly license fee, and that continues for 60 months, 5 years. And in that, we will continue the support, provide you with new material, make sure that your current material is being upgraded. And Penny and I spend a lot of time in meetings and webinars, an inordinate amount of time, just trying to stay abreast of what's going on in the marketplace. And it's been a changing scenario. And you don't have to do that. We will just inform you, like next week, Friday. Penny, just quickly talk about the event next week, Friday.
So once a month for the last 3 months, we've just been doing an update session. So this is exactly where we are at with the QCTO in terms of the skills programs, the part and full qualifications for OHS, all specifically on health and safety only. That's our area of speciality. And what's happening with the development side from LGC side, what Institute of Working at Heights are doing. So just trying to cover all the different areas and giving you feedback as to what's happening now. This last month, there's been a whole lot of QCTO workshops that have taken place, so giving you that feedback and opportunity to download those presentations as well. Yeah, so constantly keeping you updated. It's, as Ken says, it's a changing landscape.
All the time.
But it's doable. You can get the job done. And as Ken has been emphasizing, the most important part of the job, 90% of it in any event, is legal compliance training. So
100%.
That's really where the crux of this sits.
So when we started off, we said that we're going to be talking specifically to the corporates, and that license we call the platinum license. So if you are a corporate, we'll talk to you specifically. We'll have a meeting with your board if necessary, and we will talk to them and you can answer questions. More so, you can speak to Natalie and you can set up a one-on-one Zoom meeting, and we'll gladly talk to you individually via Zoom, and you can bring any of your colleagues or associates or professional advisors into that. So with that in mind, remember, you must get your prospectus. Please print it. Go through the prospectus with your highlighter. Draw up a list of questions so that when we have the meeting, we can answer those questions for you. So in summary, let me just quickly run through it again. Why do in-house training? Well, there's a host of reasons: financial and compliance and customization and efficiency and knowledge. And from that, you can see that it really does become worthwhile. The amount of money that you're going to save, the time that you're going to save, the effort you're going to save. And maybe I'll just throw this in for what it's worth. To write a training program like our ergonomics program, we developed it with one of South Africa's top ergonomists. It took a month. Now, within a workplace, who's got that time to develop a high quality, high class training program? Now, having said that, that ergonomics program, when the QCTO publishes their curriculum, we will take our existing ergonomics program and align it to the QCTO curriculum. And you get that as part of the deal. You don't have to pay extra for that. And I think that's really, really beneficial. I trust that you and your associates and colleagues would enjoy a one-on-one meeting or a board meeting or something like that. Please feel free to tell us. What we're going to do now is that we're going to stop the recording, and then we're going to go straight into a question and answer time. So I've got a couple of minutes here. I'm sure you've got questions. Please don't hesitate to ask the questions at all. So let's stop the recording, and then we will take the question time. We've got about 10, 15 minutes to deal with questions. Okay.